Welcome to NAIMBY's Solution Series program titled 7 Tips for Winning Land Use Approvals. My name is Sandy Hudson and I will be your host. The Solution Series programs are available at no cost to NAIMBY members. These mini webinars run less than 30 minutes and our goal is to provide you with some quick tips and insights, all types of positive strategies and tactics to help you succeed in today's business environment. Is there a topic you would like to learn more about? Please send us an email to solutions@naimby.org to let us know what topics you would like to hear from in future programs. Please advance to the next slide. NAIMBY has produced the popular Solution Series programs for almost 3 years. Did you miss one of our informative topics? The archives of these programs are available to NAIMBY members at no cost through the on-demand bookstore. Examples of past programs are listed on the current slide. Our topics cover finance, niche development, logistics, and more. Visit the NAIMBY website at www.naimby.org/solution series for links to the archives. Please advance to the next slide. And now let's get on with our program. With us today is Frank Noto, President and co-founder of GCA Strategies, a San Francisco-based community outreach and governmental relations firm specializing in land use and public policy issues. GCA is among America's top strategic communications firms when it comes to winning political and community support for controversial land use entitlements. Frank has helped win approval for projects ranging from supportive housing for the homeless in Ohio to a rocket factory near Silicon Valley. Clients across the nation from Maryland to Maui have included commercial office buildings, ski resorts, golf courses, industrial development, telecommunications and high-tech installations, oil refineries, housing, mixed-use developments, and the San Francisco Giants. Welcome, Frank. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Sandy. Again, today we're going to cover 7 tips for winning land use approvals. These are 7 major ideas to help developers win community and political support for your land use projects. The first 4 are do's. Do pick the low-hanging fruit. Do build on your base of support. Do focus on the public hearing. Do talk with neighbors and stakeholders. Then we come to the don'ts. And by the way, if you don't write all 7 of these now, don't worry. You're going to see each one of them again. We'll cover each of these in detail. So the don'ts. Don't provide too much information. Don't try to convert NIMBYs. And finally, don't make them mad. Our first tip is to pick the low-hanging fruit. Recruiting supporters for your land use project is like gardening when you're in a hurry. First, you want to pluck the ripe, luscious, low-hanging fruit. By analogy, why bother with ladders in hard-to-reach parts of the tree? Or why bother with people who are never going to support your project? If possible, contact your potential supporters first before you discuss your project with likely opponents. So why is this important? Well, if you start out talking to people who are likely to oppose your project, they may gang up and strangle your proposal while it is still in the womb. On the other hand, if you have a constituency of supporters already on board, your project cannot be crushed so easily. They're attacking not only you, but they're also attacking your allies. Now, there may be some exceptions to this rule. You may have to talk to elected officials or other decision makers early on. If a decision maker is going to oppose your project because they heard about it secondhand, you have to touch base with them first. But in general, set outreach priorities. Start out with direct beneficiaries, people who will directly benefit from your project. We're talking about contractors, maybe construction workers, real estate brokers, suppliers. We're also talking about potential people who will potentially use your project, your buildings. These could be potential tenants. They could be employees of the tenants' businesses. They could be local shoppers. Let me give you a couple of examples. My company, GCA Strategies, had an affordable housing project. It was located next to a very affluent community. We recruited potential tenants to support the affordable housing project, and more than 100 families looking for affordable housing attended the public hearing. And yes, the City Council was impressed. Not only did they improve the project, but they also provided more than a couple $1 million in housing subsidies. Another example, proposed shopping center included a high-end supermarket. Surprisingly, that proved a real strong draw for local shoppers who we recruited to come out to support better shopping. So potential users of your project can be effective supporters, whether they are tenant businesses, residential tenants, or shoppers. Finally, indirect beneficiaries, people who indirectly benefit from your project. These could be local merchants who expect your project to generate more foot traffic, more customers. It could be property owners who expect improved property values. Once you've built a base of support from among these project beneficiaries, then systematically work with these initial supporters to connect to their friends and associates. You're going to build on your initial support base. If the owner of ACE Contracting supports you, then he has a whole group of folks in his contacts that he can reach out to. Get him to host a lunch and invite his dependents, friends, and associates to learn about your project. Then sign them up. Do you have a construction worker on your side? Get him to enlist his wife, his parents, his neighbors, and his best buddy. If your supporter can introduce you to just 3 additional potential supporters, you're on your way. Get them involved in recruiting their friends too. After all, they have the relationship. Once you have a strong initial base of support, publicize it. After all, Coca-Cola publicizes its celebrity endorsements. When politicians run for office, they show off their endorsements. You should do the same thing. Whether you're using advertising or speaking at a community meeting, there are 2 important reasons to show off your community endorsements, your community support. Number 1 is because psychological studies show that when opponents see their strong community support for a project, they're less likely to speak out negatively. There's research done in the 1970s in West Germany that showed when people support something vocally, then other people will come out and speak, and those who oppose your project are less likely to come out and speak negatively. The second reason is would-be supporters are more likely to speak out when they see others in the community who support a project. That's a version of the bandwagon effect. Again, so opponents will speak less negatively, and supporters will feel free to come out and support you. Focus on the hearing. The vast majority of citizens in the neighborhood may favor your project, but even if hundreds of citizens favor your project, some public officials won't care unless there's community public support, unless there's public community support of your project. Elected officials may literally count bodies. If 10 neighbors testify against your project, nobody supports it, you lose, despite the merits of your project. So project sponsors need to mobilize supporters to show up at the public hearings, but you knew that. They also need them to, you can also find other visible manifestations of public support. That could be phone calls, could be emails, letters to the editor, blog posts. If people are overwhelmingly in support, you can even commission a poll or get a newspaper to do a poll. You want to talk to your neighbors and stakeholders, but do your homework first. Get to know something about the neighbors before you communicate with them. The two common sources of opposition from neighbors can stem from, number 1, lack of information, or 2, lack of involvement. So does opposition come from lack of information or even misinformation about your project? People think, well, this is going to be 8 stories when your building is only going to be 2 stories high. Then a public information program can set the record straight and reduce the intensity of opposition. Or the opposition could stem from lack of involvement. Then you don't need a lot more information. then what you need to do is make sure the information gets to the right people or in the right order. If stakeholders are likely to be insulted and denounce the project because you don't reach out to them first, go to them first. Also thinking about expanding the list of stakeholders beyond the neighborhood. On a project to get wireless towers approved for a cell phone provider, for example, we contacted cell phone users, customers. They didn't want more drop calls, so they came and testified. When you're expanding an historic cemetery, we mobilized historic preservationists to support the project. If you're going to create jobs by building, then reach out to the unemployed. Get the unions or job training nonprofits to support you. Don't provide too much information. In the face of opposition, it's natural to want to communicate with the public. Many project sponsors seem to favor disgorging a steady stream of public information in the form of flyers, newsletters, websites, email blasts, and Facebook. That's a good thing, but only if the opposition stems from lack of information or misinformation. If it comes from some other source, if it comes from a conflict of interest, or if it comes from conflict of values or lack of involvement, then too much information, public information campaigns, can stir up people who were previously uninvolved in the debate. A massive information campaign can validate vague fears or call attention to new issues to be concerned about. Before communicating, it's important to understand the motivation of your opponents. Remember this, because many outreach tactics can actually backfire by provoking additional opposition. Sometimes an under-the-radar strategy works best. You don't want to spend all your time trying to convert NIMBYs. You've obviously heard about the not in my backyard or NIMBY phenomena, but I want to distinguish most neighbors from NIMBYs. NIMBY opposition stems not from lack of information or lack of involvement, but from a sincere conflict of values. Spending most of your time communicating with NIMBYs is a waste of your time and your resources. Instead, go out and talk to folks who are likely to support your project. The more time you spend answering confirmed opponents, the more ammunition you put in their hands to fire back at you. You're not going to convert them to your point of view, and more attention just typically encourages them. Now, while it's generally a waste of time concentrating on confirmed opponents, sometimes such outreach will be required by the situation. Or local planning rules will say you have to hold a committee meeting. Or elected officials will say, go and talk to such and such group. If you're meeting with confirmed opponents, you want to utilize scientifically tested approaches to minimize opposition as much as possible. These are approaches such as focusing on mutual priorities. For example, some people see land use battles as a moral conflict between good and evil. If they hold preservation of the environment as a high moral principle, they may oppose your project. If you share your opponent's moral principles, then feel free to go and say so. For example, we value the environment very much. It's very important to us. That's why 90% of this land is going to be preserved as open space. That's why we are going to be cleaning up the creek. That's why we're going to be preserving wildlife here. You may also want to point out that there are other moral values at stake that they may share. Sure, they may hold strong beliefs about environmental protection, but how do those beliefs compare to other moral priorities, such as property rights, concepts of fairness and equity? Even if the parties hold truly conflicting values, the clash does not have to result in deadlock. When land use conflicts appear to be caused by ethical disagreements, focusing on mutual interests and solving problems rather than on conflicting values can lead the way to resolution. And even if there is no resolution, pay attention, because you can learn valuable information from opponent arguments. Perhaps you can show city officials that a NIMBY argument is outrageous or that's based on unacceptable ideology. that their argument isn't valid. For example, opponents say, oh, we don't want low-income people moving into our neighborhood. It's going to cause crime. Well, there may be public officials who reject that kind of argument, that low-income people are necessarily criminals. No, you don't want to make them mad. You don't want to make your opponents mad or madder. The goal is to avoid triggering negative feelings among opponents. So when you're meeting with them or in any communications, keep your cool. Don't respond emotionally to antisocial attacks. Remember, the attack's aimed at the project. It's not aimed at you. It's not personal. So don't criticize them. Don't preach. Don't threaten them. In fact, try to avoid getting into an argument at all. Just say what you have to say. Do encourage angry opponents to respond with civility and encourage positive emotions, because hostile behavior doesn't help anybody. There are a few things you can do to promote rational, unemotional behavior. First of all, select a pleasant environment for the discussion or community meeting. Place is not too hot or too crowded. Use names, so have name tags. Use your own name. Refer to yourself and members of your team by name. Use their names. You can provide food and drink, because people are biologically programmed to like each other when they're eating and drinking. Use and maybe distribute pencil and paper. People are taking notes. They're acting rationally. They're writing down words and thoughts. You also should be taking notes. It shows you're listening. You can be writing on a flip chart or on graph paper. Use charts. Charts that have facts and numbers. That's when you're looking at facts and numbers, you're thinking rationally. Now, don't use on your charts, don't use violent colors or moving, flashing graphics. Don't use red and orange. Those are emotional. Use blue and green, cool colors. You can also use positive words like opportunity, free, special, and popular. And that concludes our presentation, but we want to talk about, recap everything. Remember, pick the low-hanging fruit, build on your initial base of supporters, focus on the hearing, and then the don'ts. Don't provide too much information. Don't try to convert NIMBYs, and don't make them mad. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Thank you very much.
Frank, thanks for a great presentation and sharing your insights on winning community and political support for land use projects. Our next Solution Series program will be available on January 24th. Watch your email for NAIOP source or corporate e-newsletter for the program link. Thank you for listening to our session and have a good day.